All right, welcome to Talking Investing. I am Tom, and as always, this is not financial advice. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners. This is a weekly edition. We're going to go through what happened last week. We're going to take a look at not only Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners, we're going to take a look at all the major indexes. I also want to take a look at the Bitcoin ETFs, and we're going to have a quick update on Marathon and Iris Energy. So a bunch of stuff to go through. We're going for 700 likes on this video, so if you could be so kind as to smash the like button. Thanks so much, everybody. You guys have been doing a great job at that. It's been helping the channel out a lot. Also, we are just under 20,000 subscribers, so if you enjoy this content, if you like Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners, we talk about this all the time on the channel, so please consider subscribing and getting us over the top to 20,000 subscribers. Okay, let's talk about Bitcoin. We're going to take a look at our first chart, which is just week over week. This is through last Friday, so you're going to see, as always, Bitcoin is in gold. Bitcoin was down 1.5% last week. Bitcoin's been on a fantastic run, so it did take a breather. Sometimes that is necessary. So you're going to see Bitcoin down 1.5%, was still the leader. It beat all of the Bitcoin miners. Every single Bitcoin miner was in the red last week. Some of them just a little bit, some of them quite a bit. So you can see near the top of this, we have Any and Gree, which are nano cap stocks. Those were down 5 and 6%. BitDeer down 6%. Then we get to some of the larger Bitcoin miners. CleanSpark, which is kind of tied for the second largest by market cap. That was down 8% this week. Iris Energy, 9%. Riot, which is tied for second overall market cap, that was down 10%. Marathon, 11%. And then everything else was down really between 13 and 22%. So a very tough week, a pullback for the Bitcoin miners. We were just getting a little bit of momentum and it stalled out last week. Bitcoin has been going very sideways. We will take a look at that. We're having a little bit of a period of consolidation. So this is typical for Bitcoin. However, as you guys know, in cryptocurrency, days can seem like months and years. So it hasn't been that long, but I know it feels painful to a lot of you guys. So that's why I like to go through these charts and take a look at what's really happening. Okay, next quickly, year to date. So this is through Friday, February 23rd. So you can see there are only 3 Bitcoin miners in the green year to date, and really just one that's beating Bitcoin. So CleanSpark continues to be in the lead by a mile, up 49% year to date. So that's a giant move in just really, we're less than 2 months into the year. In that same period of time, you'll see Bitcoin is up 22%. So we're less than 2 months into the year, and Bitcoin's up quite a bit. So while it does feel painful and it feels like we're going sideways and we're not going anywhere, if you take just a tiny little step out, you'll see Bitcoin is continuing its rally. This is part of what is now close to a 230% rally from the bottom just about 15 months ago. Then the only other 2 Bitcoin miners in the green are Bitfarms up 4% and Marathon up 2%. You'll see Riot is just barely in the red, down 4%. The top 3 Bitcoin miners by market cap, which are Marathon, CleanSpark, and Riot, are all near the top of this chart. The smaller Bitcoin miners, the microcap and the nanocap miners, are still struggling pretty far behind. You'll see some of these down at the bottom. Mawson's down 50%, Argo Blockchain and Gree 44%, Core Scientific 43%. I think that's still finding its footing after coming out of Chapter 11. So still so far year to date, the year for the Bitcoin miners does not look great, but Bitcoin continues its run. The last few days of the year in 2023 were disastrous for the Bitcoin miners. So this is the same chart just a few days earlier, dating back to December 27th. So this has now been 8.5 weeks. You're going to see there's only one Bitcoin miner in the green. Again, it's CleanSpark up 22%. You're going to see Bitcoin up 17% in these 8.5 weeks. But the rest of the Bitcoin miners down between 14 and 63%. So I'm counting this period of time because we did have something like this in 2023. So despite the fact that by the end of the year 2023, all the Bitcoin miners were up significantly, a lot of them up 300, 400, 500, even 600% on the year. We had 14 weeks in the middle of the year in 2023 where the Bitcoin miners were down, actually even worse than this chart right here. So we are now at 8.5 weeks here in this recent run. So we will see how long this lasts, and we'll see if we can come out of this like we did the last time and have a nice big run up afterward. This next chart is comparing Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners where they were last Friday versus where they were at the peak of the previous cycle, which was November of 2021. So this was several years ago. So a lot of people complain about this chart, so you can drop in the comments if you like this chart, if you don't like this chart. And I will tell you, every Bitcoin miner is different. So for some of these Bitcoin miners, this chart may not not be that relevant, right? If they're near the bottom of this list, if they're down 99 or 98 or 97%, as some of these Bitcoin miners are, they've had fundamental shifts in their business, and they're probably never getting back to their all-time highs. Now, that's my opinion. Some of you may think that they are getting back to their previous all-time highs. I believe that the top performing Bitcoin miners, and I think there will be at least 5 of them, should get back to their previous all-time high. And in fact, I think some of them will take out their previous all-time high and go potentially to much higher numbers in this cycle. So that's why I'm looking at this chart. So be careful. No one chart is all meaningful. We've got to take all of these together and look at each one for its value. Okay, so if you look at this chart, you'll see Bitcoin, as always, in gold. It's down 26% from its previous all-time high, which again was in November of 2021. So that's actually doing a lot better than Bitcoin's ever done in the previous cycles. So Bitcoin is doing very well, and it is beating all of the Bitcoin miners at this point. For 1 week, Cleanspark did jump ahead of Bitcoin, but then obviously all the Bitcoin miners had a rough week this last week. Cleanspark is down 30% from its peak back in November of 2021. Now, that was not its all-time high, but I'm measuring this from each company's peak in November of 2021 when Bitcoin hit its all-time high. So Cleanspark is now only 30% off that number. It is clearly outperforming the rest of the field from a stock standpoint. I would expect Bitcoin and Cleanspark sooner than later to pass their previous all-time highs. But I don't think they'll be the only ones. You've got Bitfarms, which is still 68% off of its all-time high, Riot at 68%, DMG Blockchain, Cypher at 70%, Marathon at 71%, Iris Energy at 78, DigiHost at 80, BitDigital at 81, Hive at 86, right? A lot of those companies, or some of those companies, I believe will pass their previous all-time high. So you can see that leaves an awful lot of room left to the upside, I think, in this bull market and in this 4-year cycle. So of course, again, I don't know the future. This is not financial advice, so please do your own due diligence. And like I said, this is just one chart. But like all charts, I try to look for anything that gives me a clue, any opportunity of a company who's operationally performing well and maybe lagging behind from a stock performance standpoint, or vice versa. Okay, so now I want to get to a new chart that I have not put in here before. We've been looking at all the major indexes year to date. I want to take a look at what they did just last week, because last week, Bitcoin actually lagged most of the field. You're going to see Ethereum was up over 6% last week, but it's also worth noting the S&P and the NASDAQ. The S&P was up 1.66%, the NASDAQ 1.4%, the Dow 1.3%. All three of those are at their all-time high. So while the cryptocurrency world has not yet really caught up to its previous all-time high, we have the equity markets in the U.S. blowing by their previous all-time highs, and I do not believe this run is over for the equity markets, and I think we're just getting started for the cryptocurrency markets. But it is worth noting, the two things I'm keeping at the closest eye on in 2024, the Russell 2000 continues to lag. Where the other 3 indexes are at their all-time high, the Russell is nowhere near its all-time high. And this week was another week where the Russell was in the red just a little bit, but it was down while the others were up. Bitcoin, the same thing. Bitcoin was down about 1.5% last week, while Ethereum was up over 6%. And then you'll see gold up just a little bit and silver down just a little bit. Then to put all this in perspective, if we go year to date, you're going to see Ethereum's up over 28%, so they are now in the lead. And I'm basically taking a look at the 2 largest cryptocurrencies, the 2 largest commodities, which are silver and gold, and the 4 major indexes in the US. So Ethereum in the lead at 28%. It has jumped over Bitcoin this week. Bitcoin's now up just under 22% year to date. Still very strong performance. The S&P, less than 2 months into the year, is up just about 6.7%. The NASDAQ's up about 6.6%. The Dow is up 3.8%. So a very good year for most of those. But you'll see, again, the Russell year to date is a little bit in the red. So that continues to lag behind. I do think that by the end of the year, 2024 is going to be the year of the Russell 2000. But it is not starting out that way at all. And with interest rates, we think, being delayed until maybe May or beyond, it could take a little while for the Russell 2000 to start to kick into gear. I believe that will still happen. Silver and gold basically sideways, down a little bit. Gold down less than 1%. Silver down about 3.5%. So I just leave those on there to show that over time, silver and gold really have had a very hard time even keeping up with inflation. That trend continues. We'll see how that goes for the rest of the year. Next, I just want to take a look at the flows of the Bitcoin ETFs, the spot ETFs. Everybody did have a little panic at the beginning of last week, you'll see that on Wednesday of last week, Monday was a day off in the US. Tuesday, the inflows were 135 million. That was substantially less than every day of the previous week. The previous week was a record week of inflows for the spot ETFs. Then you'll see on Wednesday, we were actually a little bit in the red. Now, depending on the source, there were a little bit of inflows in this day, but on this chart, you'll see we were a little bit in the red. Most of that was due to the fact that Grayscale had a giant outflow that day of almost $200 million. For whatever reason, the last 2 days of the week, Grayscale's outflows dropped off dramatically. We know that in the previous week on February 14th, the courts gave Genesis the right to sell $1.6 billion worth of the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, or now the Grayscale Bitcoin ETF. So we are expecting some continued pressure and continued outflows to get rid of that 1.6. That is about 30,000 Bitcoin. So at this point, since the Grayscale Trust turned into an ETF, which was back on January 10th, the outflow there has been about 175,000 Bitcoin. So while this 30,000 is putting some additional pressure, I don't think it's dramatically changing the equation here. And you'll see on Thursday and Friday, we got back to business as usual. Inflows of $251 million on Thursday, inflows of $232 million on Friday. So I do expect the demand for the rest of the Bitcoin spot ETFs to outweigh the outflow of the Grayscale spot ETF, which has happened basically every single day for the last month, other than one day. So we'll keep our eye on that this week. This is an important part. These spot ETFs, as I've said, I think we're only just in the very, very early stages of this. So I think there's a lot more buying pressure that will come as a function of these. And at some point, the Grayscale pressure will subside. It actually already did subside for a couple of weeks. And then with the Genesis situation, it's ticking back up a little bit, but we will get through that sooner than later as well, in my opinion. Lastly, news on two Bitcoin miners. I did a video on Marathon a few days ago. You can check that out on the channel. Marathon was struggling in the month of February from a production standpoint. They went through a spell last week where production was down quite a bit. So I did do a video talking about what the reasons for that was and what I think the short-term and long-term ramifications are. But I did want to follow up on that. Marathon has its own pool, so we're able to track what they're doing basically in real time. So you'll see I did want to point out these highlighted in blue. On February 25th, Marathon did solve 9 blocks. So that was the best day they had all year. After about a week of reduced production, some days were at 1 or 2 blocks. They do seem to be back on track. The day before that, they had 4 blocks mined. So on today, February 26th, it looks like they're already at 3 blocks. So it does look like their production is back on track. I still do expect they will not be able to catch up to January's production, but it seems like they're finishing the month strong after having a few different reasons why their productivity was down. Again, if you want to know what those reasons are, I did do a deep dive and you can check that out. Lastly, Iris Energy put out an update this morning. They have plans to get to 20 exahash by the end of the year. They were at 6.2 exahash at the end of January. They've jumped up to 7 exahash here before the end of February, so they seem to be on track. And then the next bullet point is the remaining 3 exahash to be commissioned through H1 2024. So by June 30th, they do expect to be at 10 exahash. That's what they've been saying they're going to do. It looks like they're executing this plan so far on track. And then they have some looser plans for the second half of the year. They have another 10 exahash of machines that they have purchase ordered, and they're talking about potentially getting to 20 exahash by the end of the year. So we'll keep our eye on that. Those are just a couple of the Bitcoin miners that had some newsworthy stuff this morning. Lastly, just finishing on the Bitcoin chart itself, this is Bitcoin on the 1-day time frame. And you're going to see we had a big run up for several days. The last big green candle we had was back here on February 14th. So that was about 12 days ago now. You're going to see since then we've been trading in a tight range somewhere between 50,600 and just under 53,000. So about a $2,500 range really for not quite 2 weeks now. This is very typical. If you guys remember this period that I just circled here in yellow, this was basically from December 4th all the way to February 7th. So this was 2 full months of trading inside of about a $3,000 $3,000 range. We popped out of it once to the upside, ran right back into it, once to the downside, ran right back into it. So Bitcoin can consolidate, but for the last 15 months, each one of these consolidation periods has led to the next move up. Now, there's no guarantee that that will be true, and you'll see even inside of this sideways consolidation, at one point there was a 21% pullback in about a 10-day period of time. So all things are possible, but again, I just wanted to show people we're in a very tight range right now. We're headed sideways, and I guess we're all waiting to see what comes next. So that's all things Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. A quick update from last week going into this week. So if you're new here, we're shooting for 20,000 subscribers, so please consider subscribing to the channel, and remember to smash the like button. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.